Hello all, hello, I'm Tony D. This is Tony D's music channel, and I wanted to come on here and give my thoughts about the Paul McCartney TikTok live that just happened. Now, first of all, there were a lot of good parts of this, but as a whole, I was a bit disappointed and underwhelmed. Not by Paul himself, anyway. Paul himself was his typical lovely, cute self. But the thing about TikTok Live is that people ask questions that they submit online. And I just thought, in so many interviews that Paul does or that Ringo does, they get asked the same questions or the same types of questions or questions that are just plain boring and not really exciting to hear his answer to. And I thought we got a lot of that here. But first, I want to discuss some things about the interview first. Of course, he's promoting the new album, Boys in Dungeon Lane. And at least 3 times you heard a little bit of a snippet of a new song. They played a snippet of As You Lie There, the first track on the album, a snippet of Down South, and a snippet of Come Inside. Now, when the album was first announced a few months ago, we got the entire track listing online, and when I saw there was a song called As You Lie There, my mind thought, maybe As You Lie There is about the day that Paul's mother died of cancer. That was my theory. That was my hope. But now that we know a bit more about these songs, we know that As You Lie There is a sort of rocking song about this young woman Paul knew as a teenager that he had a crush on, so to speak. And he's talking about wanting to hook up with her. That's what the song is about. So now it's a totally different connotation. And I quite like the snippet I heard where he starts off with some guitar and then starts off with like talking, singing. So I'm excited to hear that song in 3 days, possibly 2 days. And then we got a snippet of the song Down South, which is all about his friendship with George Harrison and traveling, south with him and having these trips with him. And he told a very a very funny story during this TikTok live about George Harrison, where they would go on some hitchhiking trip, where they were on some guy's electric car or electric bike, and George was wearing trousers with a zipper, and then he got electrocuted or something or shocked because his zipper was touching the electric battery on the car. So that's funny. And then Paul mentioned that George's widow, Olivia, once told that story, but she thought it was Paul who got shocked. So that's funny. And then there's a song "Come Inside," which is sort of I guess you would say, a seduction song about inviting somebody to love you, singing like "Come inside," "I'm an open book," "Come inside with me," things like that. Sort of like George's song "Cloud Nine," kind of similar type lyrics. It's really exciting. Based on those three little snippets, I'm sure I'm gonna love those 3 songs. And then somebody asked Paul in the comments about his favorite track on the album. He mentioned "Days We Left Behind," which has already been released for the past month or so. It's gorgeous. And he also said that the song "Mama Gets By" is one of his favorites on the album. Now, what we've been told about that song is that song is sort of a love letter to all the mothers out there and all the women all the mothers out there who are women. Usually, mothers are women. I've found that to be true. If it's not true, let me know. And he mentioned that in that song, there's this grand orchestral arrangement. And if you know anything about Paul, you know he loves putting a grand orchestral arrangement in his songs. I could list all of them right now that he's ever done. Obviously, Yesterday, Eleanor Rigby, and then, of course, Golden Slumbers, Dear Friend. I can name them off of all his albums right now. Obviously, you got the ending of 1985. You got what's it called? I'm Carrying from London Town has a little bit of an orchestra thing. You've got Come On People from 1993 on the Off the Ground album, but that's not important right now. But yeah, that's a song I'm excited about. Mama Gets By. At first I thought it was about his mother, but now we find out that's about all mothers, and it's sort of like a part two to the 1979 Wings song, Daytime, Nighttime Suffering, which was a song about the struggle and the plight that all mothers and women go through. And now he's kind of going back to that well, which I love. Again, there are so many common themes with Paul McCartney's music. He's written about a dozen or so songs about telling the story of women and women characters. And like I said at the beginning, I just think some of the questions that people submitted via TikTok were kind of silly. Somebody asked, "Oh, when was the last time you saw Ringo and contacted him?" Well, they've been friends for 60 years. Do you think it was that long ago? Of course, he said that they did FaceTime last week. But who cares? It's Paul McCartney. Is that really the most burning question you want to ask him? Somebody asked Paul influenced them to go vegetarian, and then asked why he called his album Ram, which again is a silly question because that's information you can easily find out through books. You don't need to ask that when Paul is right there. Somebody asked Paul, when you made this album, do you have a clear vision for what it was going to be about? Of course, he said no, because that's not how Paul works. When Paul writes songs, the ideas just come to him. He doesn't plan anything. He'll just sit down at the guitar or piano, and an idea or a melody, it just comes to him. He just has that gift. It's a gift. And when you have a gift, you don't really plan things. Things just come to you. Somebody asked Paul a few hypothetical questions. Which day in the Beatles era would you like to revisit and go back to? I think he said the rooftop concert, January 30, 1969. It was a great day. It certainly was, from what I've seen. I can't say because I wasn't there. And somebody asked him, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self? He just said things like, work hard, apply yourself. Although if you're a musician, you play hard, you don't work hard. Because Paul has said that before, that I'm not a workaholic because I don't really work, I play. Which is kind of a funny, silly thing to say. Someone asked him, if you could go back to an earlier time period, even before the Beatles were famous, where would you go back to? He, of course, just said the 50s, which is pretty predictable because that was when he and everybody else discovered rock and roll from America. Elvis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Bill Haley and the Comets. Yeah. I relate to Paul on that. So many times I thought about what it would be like if I went back to a time like that, when that classic music was brand new. I wouldn't really choose the 50s for that, because I just think, besides the music, life in the 50s was so bad. Paul showed off the artwork inside the album, where he's got a really cool art collage, and it has portraits of him and the other Beatles. And I think he said that his daughter Mary drew that, if I'm not mistaken. And he compared this to the cover art of the Sgt. Pepper album, which has that large artwork of dozens of famous people that they all admired. And so this is like that, because you can get lost looking at all the faces on there. And I am really excited about this, because that artwork is what's on the picture disc of the album, where you got that artwork right on the record. So that's really exciting. Oh, yeah, I gotta mention this funny moment from the TikTok Live, where Paul was asked about Ringo, and he said he really likes Ringo's country albums from recently, And then he said the new Ringo album was called Long, Long something. Come on, Paul, it's 3 words. Long, long road. I get it, he's 83. But besides that, his mind's pretty sharp. And I do want to mention one factual inaccuracy Paul made. He mentioned Ringo and the country stuff, and he said that Ringo's the first Beatle track with Ringo and lead vocals was Act Naturally. That's not true. That was the 3rd Beatles song with Ringo and lead vocals. The first one was I Want to Be Your Man. The second one was Honey Don't. And the third was Act Naturally. I guess Paul forgot the first 2. You know, my only wish for this interview thing, whatever it was, is that Paul would have mentioned Linda a bit. Somebody asked him which song on the album would be John Lennon's favorite if he was still with us. Of course, he mentioned Days We Left Behind, because you just know that those lyrics are about John. And I gotta mention this other funny question. Somebody asked him, has anybody ever misinterpreted lyrics in your songs? And he mentioned this famous controversy over the Wings song from '72 called Hi, 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 one of my personal favorites, because it's a rock and roll song about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And anyway, in one verse of the song, he sings, let you lie on that bed, get you ready for my polygon. Now, many people, the radio stations banned that song, claiming that the lyric is polygon, and it's about sex, and Paul says, well, no, it's surreal. It could be about anything. Okay, that's true, Paul, but come on. Don't play coy with me. Whether it's bodygun or polygon, that's clearly a lyric about sex. Come on. Just be honest with us here. Just be honest. I love that song because it's about sex, drugs, rock and roll. Yeah, and he mentioned that somebody that Elvis Costello knew thought the first line of Strawberry Fields was living is easy with nice clothes instead of living is easy with eyes closed. But that's not Paul's song. John Lennon wrote that. You know, I submitted 2 questions to this TikTok live thing, hoping Paul would answer them. I asked a question that he never gets asked, which is that in the 70s, Paul was a new father to 2 girls, and he and Linda and the girls, Heather and Mary and then Stella, were together quite literally all the time. They were there in the studio with him when he was making the records. They were there when they were out live on tour. And I wanted to ask him, how did it feel to be the only rock star in the 70s to be a dedicated and doted family man? But Ross, the faceless guy doing the TikTok, chose not to ask my question. Or the other question that I asked. But that's fine. I just really want Paul or Ringo to be doing interviews like this and get asked questions that they wouldn't normally be asked. Because it's so boring to watch these things and get asked questions that we know the answer to already. And to hear Paul ask questions that are just dumb, quite frankly. I think some of these questions are just dumb. Somebody asked him, "Oh, how does it feel that your music was it first released on vinyl and then CD and then cassette and now it's on Spotify?" And he said, "Oh, it's phenomenal." Of course he said that. What else is he gonna say? People, for F's sake, ask him questions he doesn't get asked all the time. And when that guy asked him about, well, why was the album Ram called Ram? I already knew that answer. I already knew that. I want questions I don't know the answers to already. Obviously, it's from the new album. And I did think it was funny when he mentioned his recent TV appearances. And then he mispronounced the name of Stephen Colbert, because his name is Colbert. And Paul said Colbert or something like that, which I have no issue with. I mean, he's British. He's not going to know Stephen Colbert that well. But yeah, I was disappointed by this because if you got Paul on a live thing on social media, I think it should be much longer than 45 minutes. I know he's a busy guy, obviously, but I wish they had gotten him for an hour or 50 minutes and asked a lot more questions. I mean, this guy sifted through all the questions. Those are the best ones he could think of. Really? Really? He also discussed in this interview about how, when the Beatles were young, they could not read sheet music. So they just knew the chords by ear, and they would go to somebody's house, and then that was where they first heard the B7 chord. They were like, "Oh, it's B7," and Paul was saying, I'm not going to encourage young people to go out and not learn the sheet music. I think they should learn that. There was a weird question somebody asked Paul where they asked him, if you were Prime Minister of England, what would you do? And he said, make things run efficiently. I think there are a lot of people there not running the government well, and that things should be run well, and NHS should work, and the government should work, and there should be no potholes, which is all well and good. Those are all well and good answers. Of course, they're very vague answers, not very concrete, descriptive answers about policies. But it's Paul. He was never a guy who would give detailed answers on political issues. Or at least he's not that person now, lately. There were a few times here and there where he would weigh in on politics. Like back in the 90s when he was really big on animal rights and trying to hector people to go veggie. Yeah, I was disappointed by some of these questions. I want questions to go deeper than this. And this was not as great as I was expecting it to be. Not that I had any high hopes. I think people like me and other hardcore fans online would have asked better questions. But all in all, really nice seeing Paul on TikTok. I think Ringo could do it as well. And, one of the silly questions that I thought somebody asked was, hey, what are your favorite shoes to wear? Okay, well, he's wearing slip-on shoes. That was his answer. But who the hell cares? Who cares? I see Ringo and I clearly see him wearing sneakers. I don't care to ask him about that. He's Ringo. He's Paul. I don't care about the shoes. I mean, this is Paul McCartney. Somebody with a 60-plus year of recording music. You're asking about shoes? Is this some award show red carpet? Who cares? And I literally just thought of a few more questions I could have asked while watching this thing. I don't care when was the last time he chatted with Ringo. What I would like to know is, was he a fan of Ringo Starr narrating Thomas Tank Engine and Friends? Because that was what Ringo did from 84 to 86, and then starred in the American spin-off, Chinam Station. I want to hear Paul's thoughts on Thomas and Chinam Station. But nobody asked about that. But yeah, this interview was done in about a flash, it seemed to me. Only about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. It's been a flash. But, the little snippets of songs from the new album that I heard, those were bloody fantastic. And also, sometimes I watch interviews with celebrities, and I think they're way too modest about their work, where they say, oh yeah, I think I'm pretty good at this, or well, I'm glad people like what I do. I think with Paul, he doesn't need to be so modest. Don't be so modest, Paul. He said he thinks the new album is good, he likes it. Come on, Paul, it's you. You can say way more than that. You can say, my new album is brilliant. It's smashing. Come on. I mean, this is Paul McCartney. Every album he does is amazing, almost. I don't think every album is amazing. I didn't think the last one was amazing. But most of his albums are amazing. He should be saying that instead of just, oh, it's good. Come on, Paul. It's bloody brilliant. Again, you're inviting us to hear stories about your childhood. That's way more than just good. But I'm going to wrap this up here. Thank you for watching. And I'm really excited for the new album in 2 days. I'm really excited. And you all should be too. So thank you for watching. Comment what you think about all this. And thank you.